Eugenie Grandet. In the early 19th century, in central France, there was a small town called Saumur. It was not prosperous, but it produced wine. And it also produced a certain kind of people, those who believed only in money for their entire lives. Monsieur Grandet was the most successful among them. He made his fortune by speculating on land during the Revolution. By hoarding grain and exploiting tenant farmers, slowly locking his wealth into cellars and iron chests. He lived in the oldest and coldest house in town, eating the simplest food. Yet, everyone privately called him the richest man in Saumur. At home, however, he was only a miserly, irritable father who calculated every cost. His daughter Eugenie grew up inside such a house. She was innocent, slow, and strictly supervised. Even a single candle or an extra piece of sugar required her father's permission. She knew nothing of love and nothing of the world, only obedience and waiting. The story truly began on Eugenie's birthday. That night, the Grandet household lit more candles than usual. And that evening, a young stranger was brought into the house. He wore refined Parisian clothes. He spoke with the lightness and confidence of the capital. His name was Charles Grandet. Charles was the son of Monsieur Grandet's brother. And it was his first time in Saumur. On the surface, this was a family visit. But what Grandet truly cared about was never family. Before Charles arrived, Grandet had already received a letter. The letter said one thing: his brother in Paris was bankrupt. Not only bankrupt, but deeply in debt, and had taken his own life. At that moment, Grandet's mind immediately began to calculate. His brother was dead. The debts remained. Was it possible that assets were left behind? Cheap property, hidden cash. Or perhaps some remaining value. That was why he welcomed Charles with unusual warmth. But soon, the truth was revealed. In his conversations with Charles, it became clear that Charles knew nothing about his father's finances and had no assets he could inherit. All the debts were like shadows about to fall upon this young man. From that moment on, Charles became a complete liability in Grandet's eyes. Keeping him would only attract creditors, only cause trouble, and might even lead to legal disputes. So Grandet decided to send him away immediately. The faster the better, the farther the better. Yet, during this brief period of contact, Eugenie, for the first time, met someone completely different from the world she lived in. Charles spoke of Paris, of balls, of freedom, of the future. He was fragile and anxious, yet still possessed a kind of sincerity. A spoiled sincerity she had never seen before. Eugenie fell in love with him, not with passion, but with a desire to protect. On the night before, Charles was sent overseas to make his living. Eugenie did something that changed her life. She gave Charles the gold coins her mother had left her as a dowry. She gave them all to Charles. It was not money for escape, but a silent and resolute trust. She hoped that one day Charles would return and take her away. Grandet discovered this, but he did not take the gold back. That money did not belong to him under the law. To reclaim it would mean acknowledging family property disputes. It would mean possible external scrutiny and cost. By comparison, sending Charles away immediately and cutting ties completely with this liability was the lowest cost and most rational choice. So he quickly arranged a ship and sent Charles overseas. In Grandet's world, feelings did not matter, blood ties did not matter. Only accounts mattered, and they had to be perfectly clear. Charles left, and Eugenie began a long wait. She refused all proposals in the cold, old house, guarding that unfulfilled love. Time passed, Grandet grew older and more withdrawn. Until one day, he died in a house piled with money. Eugenie inherited all of his wealth. Many years later, Charles returned. He had indeed succeeded, making a fortune in colonial trade. He entered high society and learned calculation, coldness, and precision. He was no longer the young man who needed to be saved. He had already turned love into an asset that could be traded. When Eugenie stood before him, he chose a more profitable marriage. At that moment, Eugenie finally understood. That money can change fate, and it can also corrupt the soul. Eugenie became one of the wealthiest people in Saumur. She had money, she had freedom, but she no longer had illusions. She devoted her life to duty, charity, and silence. Grandet died in money. Charles became money. Eugenie possessed money, yet refused to be ruled by it. In this story, there are no true victors. Only a world shaped by money and destroyed by money.